Welcome, everyone, to the Fourth Taviran podcast. My name is Justin, and I have my fellow Taviran here with me, Kyle and Mark. How are you guys doing?
Hey, guys. Doing good.
Doing well, thanks.
Yeah, and we are here to talk about the Wheel of Time. We recently did a trailer review from the Amazon Prime series that we just talked about that trailer, what we thought, what we liked about it. So look for that if you haven't seen it already. And we also have started book 2 of the Wheel of Time, doing a review of that book with The Great Hunt. We've done the first 7 chapters, and we'll get back to that here after this episode, we will be talking about the Aes Sedai, the tower, the White Tower, and the different Ajahs and what they do. So that's something that's really interesting, and it's important to know while you're reading the series, perhaps watching the show. It just kind of, there's a lot of information there, and we hope to kind of distill that information and just make it more simple and understandable as you continue reading forward. Plus, it's pretty cool to talk about. So, but yeah, so the White Tower. Well, first off, let's talk Aes Sedai. Initially, in the Age of Legends, they were male and female. There was a male half of the one power and a female half, and then the breaking happened. The Dark One tainted the male half, and so they all started to go crazy because of the Dark One's touch. And so all the men died, or eventually died, and there was just left the women. And they were still called Aes Sedai. And they, after the breaking kind of calmed down, the world stopped its upheaval, and chaos started to calm down. They grouped together and formed not modern day, but this version of the Aes Sedai that we are reading about and watching in the show. So that's kind of the backstory in a nutshell. Mark, the White Tower. Well, what do you know about the Aes Sedai joining together and starting things up in the beginning?
It was not as peaceful as it sounds.
Yeah.
So they don't really know. The information that's given from the White Book is sometime in the late first 100 years, the White Tower started forming, and it really kind of came down to factions of Aes Sedai, and they called themselves Ajah then. And it's good to note that Ajah basically was a political entity of like thinking. Right, that's how it was used in the Age of Legends. So, for example, you could have an Ajah that advocated for, I don't know, voting rights, right? And then you could have an Ajah that advocated for this, right? They were just political entities, so you had all these different Ajahs, is what they were called, political different ideals from them, and they started kind of fighting each other.
Yeah.
They had different ideas on what a White Tower should be, on how they should be, and then. What we do know is that they all got together, had a meeting, whether it was, hey, let's get on the same page, whether it was kind of like a truce, we're going to kill everyone unless you join us. We don't really know what that meeting was like, but we do know that after that happened, there was a couple of these groups that had to be forced to submit. There were people captured and stilled, other people came and bent the knee. Sometime in the first 100 years, late first 100 years, we got the White Tower. Everyone that needed to submit submitted. Everyone that needed to be stilled were stilled, and they broke down into 7 separate Ajahs. And we call them the Ajahs now, right? You have got the red, the green, the brown. What else do we have? We have got the gray, the yellow,
White,
the blue, white, right? So we got the 7 Ajahs, and they're basically political groups. And and we'll talk about this, but once you break down what the 7 Ajahs do and what they stand for, that's exactly what it is, right? And so these 7 Ajahs represent all the women, and that happened, about the first 100 years. And then Tarvalin, they started building Tarvalin. It took them about just over 100 years to build, and they built, the biggest building that had been built since the Age of Legends. So pretty cool history, and it's a good little read. There's not much more to it than that. It drops some names. None of the names are super important, but I think it's good to note that that's where the 7 Ajahs came from, is through the forced formation of the tower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then they elected or chose an Amerlin seat, and the first one was Bonwin Maragadin of the Red Ajah. So, the Red Ajah. Well, let's get into like the different Ajahs and kind of what their roles are, what their responsibilities are. Kyle, what's your favorite Ajah? Which one's your
What's
favorite?
my favorite Ajah?
Yeah. Tell us about some of them.
So there's quite a few, like we mentioned. They all adhere to like a different color, right? You have your red and blue and green and brown and gray and white and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And so the blue are very prominent in the book, right? And kind of associate themselves for righteous causes, right? Or to champion worthy causes, right? Mm-hmm. They're very good at political maneuvering, right? They aren't necessarily negotiators, right? Which is really kind of what I believe the Gray Ajah is, specializes in mediating and negotiating between two different factions or parties. But they do support these worthy causes or are part of big events, right? Mm-hmm. And so, finding the Dragon Reborn, big event, right? And so you've got people like Moraine, like Swan, right, who are prominent members of the Blue, who are also main characters in the show, right? Mm-hmm. The Red is always very interesting, right? And they're traditionally they're portrayed in the book quite a bit to kind of be an antagonistic Ajah, right?
Yeah.
Just because of their primary mission to gentle men who can channel, right? Now that I don't think like Mark mentioned before, these Ajahs existed beforehand, right? Based off of different political ideologies and other things like that. This one obviously likely did not exist in that time, right? Because men could channel and would be fine, right? And so this seems to me like an Ajah found out of a necessity,
yeah,
right? And so consequently, a lot of Aes Sedai that belong to this, because of their feeling toward men, typically don't associate with them very much, right? Unless they need to be gentled or handled or other things like that. So you won't see people in the Red Ajah bonding warders,
yeah,
right? So they are typically not associated with anything that has to do with men or males, right? Aside from capturing them, gentling them, and discarding them.
Yeah.
And so those are two of them.
Yeah. So the blue and the red. The green is kind of the opposite of the red, which, colors.
Yes.
Green is opposite of red. But they like men.
They very much do.
But they're also the battle Ajah, so they're, front lines and going out to battle. But it's interesting, there's not a lot of battles lately anyway.
Right.
I guess during the siege of Tarvalin by Arthur Hawkwing was probably the last big battle with Aes Sedai.
Right.
But they're the military force, and they bond multiple warders. While usually the other Ajahs just have the one, they will bond multiple to help them fight.
Right.
And one of the main characters, Egwene, wants to be of the green because she wants to be a fighter, I guess.
And it's interesting you brought up the whole lack of battles, right? Because that becomes very prominent in a lot of the books, right? In that while they promote themselves as the battle Ajah, right, they really are pretty inexperienced.
Yeah.
When the rubber meets the road later in the book, they learn, but they aren't terribly effective given the time of peace it's all been.
Yeah. And they were during the Trolloc Wars, I'm sure they were pretty busy.
Right.
That went on for quite some time. I do like the yellow Ajah as well. They're the healers, and they learn how to not only do stuff with like medicines and things like that, but with the power they can heal people. I think most Aes Sedai have some level of healing, but the yellows, that's their specialty. Right? They study that. They figure out how to do that. And one of our main characters, Nynaeve, she gravitates toward the yellow and becomes quite proficient at healing people. And is able to heal things that have never been able to be healed before, as we read in the story. So it's pretty cool. Let's see what else we got. We got the Gray, like you mentioned. They're the negotiators, they're mediators. They kind of do treaties. We don't really see the Gray that much. They're there in the background, but what are they? I can't remember a time where they actually did anything.
Not really anything significant that isn't mentioned as a side, right?
Yeah, I think they kind of took charge in the field of Merlo. Yeah, when they brought everyone together, right? And like kind of like Rand came and talked to everybody. Kind of talked about them help setting all that up.
Yeah.
Getting all the leaders there and things like that.
So that leaves 2, 4, 6.
So there's the Brown. The Brown is one of my favorites. They are, one of the prominent characters. Varen is a Brown, right? And the Brown are responsible for essentially preserving knowledge, right? Learning and preserving knowledge.
They're the
and
librarians.
So, the librarians, right? The stuffy librarians. And so they're perceived as aloof a lot of the time because of that, right? They're wealths of information and knowledge, right? And they all kind of specialize in their own, academic focus, right? But they can be perceived as naive and aloof in a lot of political maneuverings inside of the tower. But it's always fascinating to see the depth of their knowledge in different situations. Anyways, Mark, you were going to chime in there.
Yeah, I guess got a weird question. This is I'm going to go on left field here. So the Browns, they ran the library, right? We hear a lot about the secret depositories throughout the book, right?
Yeah.
These are like for your eyes only, upper echelon of Aes Sedai, right? Like, I mean, not very many people know them. I mean, know what's in it, even among Aes Sedai.
Yeah.
During the Trolloc Wars, there was a fire set to the library, and a lot of information was lost. Was that just happenstance, or was that targeted? Because there was Dread Lords during the Trolloc Wars.
Yeah.
I know that.
And I would assume the Black Ajah existed back then. I would say it's targeted. I mean, who would want to, even if you weren't of the Brown, why would you want to destroy the knowledge unless you had a nefarious purpose or reason behind it?
Yeah, I would bet it was targeted. I as far as who did it, I mean that's a good question. It could be the Black Ajah. I would. Yeah, that's the thing. Is I bet it was targeted just to weaken, I guess, the future generations for when the Dark One would actually rise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering what you guys thought. Like if it's just because it seems weird. Like, hey, we're gonna go attack Tarvalin, set the library on fire. Like, of all the things you're setting on fire, right? Like, just kind of strange.
I mean, because I could see, like, when stuff starts getting real in the books, stuff starts getting really bad, right? The Tower turning to the Browns and saying, what exists in this library to help us fight, right? And so a burning would curb that ability, right? And so it's like nuking your intelligence, more or less, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder what was going on. What was...
Yeah, there's a lot of story there. I mean, I'm sure there's some great stories in that era, the Trolloc Wars. So...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the Brown. And I think the top 4 of the 7 Ajahs that we read about in the books would be blue, red, green, and brown, right?
Right.
And some yellow is probably the next most popular after that. The White Ajah, I think, is the last one. I don't think we see them here and there, kind of like the gray. But white is, they don't, what do they do? I don't even know.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, they're like your philosophers, right? They're like your, Socrates running around, and like I imagine like that ideology is pre-Ishmael, right? Like if Ishmael never turned to the dark side, he would have been from the White Ajah, right? He was a big time philosopher.
Yeah,
that's a good point. And I mean, there's also prominent characters that are of the White Ajah, in the book too, right? That play a major part. Oh, I can't remember her name, but I think it starts with an A. But anyways, very, very prominent and key character that is of the White. So they Alvier, that's it.
Alvier.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Okay. So that's the 7, right? And then the Black Ajah, which don't exist.
Right.
Which they do not exist.
Yeah. So, and they have different alliances. I think we talked about this in the last review episode where the blue and the green had been aligned for years, hundreds of years maybe, quite some time. And then the Greens started to change their alliance, their allegiance, and started making an alliance with the red, which was like the blue's enemy, basically, right? Mm-hmm. So this is one of the reasons why Swan Shanshai went to Valdara to talk to Moraine and see what she had discovered. So alliances play a big deal with the Ajahs. They're very political. We have, so there's the Amerlin seat, and then there's the different Ajahs have their own councils that sit in on with the Amerlin seat to make decisions.
It's called the Hall of the Tower.
Yep, the Hall of the Tower. So, and I think there's 6. Is there 6 of them?
I think there's 3 per Ajah.
3 per Ajah.
Yeah, 3 per Ajah. Yep.
3 per Ajah that sit in and make decisions. And I think, Kyle, you brought this up earlier. I think the Hall can override the Amerlin if there's enough votes. Is that
right? I think there's a quasi-parliamentary relationship between the Amerlin and the Hall, right? They can definitely depose an Amerlin.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so it would, they can override her too, right? Obviously, it's kind of like the Amerlin is the president or the prime minister, right? And so it's an interesting kind of form of checks and balances inside the tower. And so consequently, to your point, Justin, political alliances between Ajahs, especially when a rule or law or something is being passed, is critical, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you want just like it works in today's political climate, what works for them is they have more than just 2 parties, right? They've got 7. Mm-hmm. And so making alliances with, key Ajahs is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you have the Keeper, who is like not even the vice president, like the assistant to the Amerlin seat. She's involved in a lot of the meetings, but she doesn't seem to have much political power.
Yeah, not really. She's kind of like the mouthpiece, kind of like the secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like an assistant to the regional manager.
Yeah.
Assistant to. Nice.
So, but she has a lot of knowledge, and knowledge is power, but because she sits in on a lot of the stuff that the Amerlin only knows about. So the Amerlin seats, there's only been 2 or 3 that have been deposed and stilled. I think just 2, right? Up until the story begins.
Up until the story begins, yeah.
So we got Bonwyn, the first one. She...
it says there's 3.
3? Okay.
Yeah, it says since the breaking of the world, only 3 have been stripped. The first Tetswan predates Bonwyn.
Oh, okay.
And has rumored to have been involved in the betrayal of Manethrin.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Tetswan, Bonwyn.
And Swan Sanche.
And then Swan. Okay. So 3 total. Mm-hmm. 2 before Swan, and then she was the 3rd. Okay. And so Tetswan was red, Bonwyn was red, and Bonwyn was the last red Amerlin seat because of the tower viewed this as a betrayal, so they don't trust him anymore. But the green, so Swan was of the blue. The one before her, Mareth Jane, was blue. Then before her, Saren Vayu was gray. Before her was blue, Tamara Ospanya. Then blue before her, brown before her, green, white, gray. So it'd been a while since there had been a green Amerlin seat. So that's why they decided to align with the red in this start of the Great Hunt that we read about. So they can have an alliance, but the red want power. So why would the green align with the red and, not someone else? Because I think, you would expect the red to backstab them or betray them and, do a power grab for themselves, which kind of happens as we go on.
I think probably because they're the most influential. The red is the largest Ajah, right? So they've got a lot of political sway just out of sheer numbers. And then you also have Elida, who is with them, who has a lot of personal power, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the green, I would say, would be take blue out of it, would be the next most influential. They're the battle Ajah, they have a lot of warders. These guys are going to be your field generals. And by doing that, the blue are super, right? They've got schemes upon schemes upon schemes. So you're not going to outmaneuver them, right? These guys are amazing. So how do you beat them? Just by sheer numbers, right? You're going to have to take everything that they depend on out from underneath them. So I think that they join forces just because they know we're not going to beat them, right? We can't beat them, straight on. Let's just join forces. We'll get them out of there, and then we'll fight that fight later.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So the breakdown of the Amerlin seat by Ajah: 11 blue Amerlins, 9 gray. Gray is the next, which makes sense. They're the mediators, right? They have that political kind of gravitas, I guess.
Yeah.
Green is with 5, white 3, yellow 2. Oh, 3 yellow. Sorry, I'm reading it wrong. 11 blue, 9 gray, 7 green, 5 white, 3 yellow, and then just the 2 red until Elida, she was red, so there's 3. One thing that the Ajahs do, except maybe the white, they have their eyes and ears, they call them. Their spy networks throughout the different cities. And the blue is known for having the most extensive network and the most effective. And so you'll read about that as you read the series. The blues, what are the blues should know. If something happens, the blues should know. And that was kind of the downfall of Swan. She's of the blue, so why didn't she know about the false dragons? Why didn't she know about Camelin, the riots in Camelin, before they happened to make some moves? So someone was trying to derail and prevent that, those networks from getting information back to the tower. But they all have their own. Yellow, they have even double agents sometimes. So again, not only in the tower, but outside of the tower with not only the Aes Sedai that live outside of the tower, but there's, the people they pay, a lot of political maneuvering and double crossing and just, it's not, that's what I like about this story is there's just so much, there's so many levels. You think, oh, well, the Aes Sedai, they're not just one big group. There's all these different groups and they're all plotting against each other. And then you got their servants or their people out in the field. They're all plotting against each other and giving each other disinformation and things like that. So it's just layer after layer after layer is just all this things that's going on with these, especially with these Ajahs, these Aes Sedai. And even the Amerlin has her own vast network, right? Pretty extensive network just for her and her purposes. So, yeah.
You also have the idea of talents that come in.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That the Aes Sedai can use and that, develop even more during this, the story. And so you have like foretelling, right?
Yes.
Where Elida claims to have foretelling, right? And I think she does to a certain
Yeah,
extent.
she does.
Right. And so basically the ability to predict the short future, or to have visions of the future, more or
Yeah.
less, right?
So Elida does it, and then the one Amerlin, was that, what was her name? The one that had the, no, it wasn't the Amerlin, it was
I
her
think
keeper.
it was the keeper.
Her
Yeah.
keeper had the foretelling, and then she died right after. Was there anybody else that had foretelling?
Well, that's a good question.
I think it's mentioned that Elida does.
Right. Elida does. It's interesting that Min has it, but she's not.
She's a little different.
She doesn't use the power for it.
Right.
Guitarra Moroso.
Oh, yeah.
Right. That's the
Was
keeper.
the-
Oh, she's the keeper.
Yeah, it was the keeper.
Okay.
And then she died right after, right?
Yeah.
Right. Right. And so, like, other talents. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh no, I was gonna say I think it's important to note like that this is a time, right, when tomorrow was. This is a time where the Black Aja was super active, right? They killed Tamra, right? They kill her. They kill the next Amerlin.
Yeah.
Amerlin, and then the next one, I looked it up. She died of old age, I guess. She was just already old. And then Swan Sanche came into power, which is kind of begs to wonder, why did they all of a sudden become inactive? Right? They were super active in killing two Amerlin.
Amerlin.
I hate that. Amerlins. They're
Say
super
it how
active
you
in
want to
killing
say
two
it.
They're super active in killing two Amerlins, and then they just kind of disappeared.
That's a good point. Because that all happened during New Spring.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, exactly.
then for 20 years, nothing happens. When Swan came into power. So did Swan influence that, or did they just, were they fearful of Swan, or something else?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes you wonder, right? Like, I don't know why, but obviously something happened, and maybe at that point it became, okay, we have a really good idea. We don't need to, run down the tower anymore and expose ourselves. Now we're going to race Moiraine.
Right. See, that's where my mind was going. Is once they kill the Amerlin, technically, I guess from the Amerlin they learn, and perhaps the Dark. I would bet the Dark One already knows that the dragon's reborn, and so the Dark One wants all of his efforts focused on finding the dragon before anybody else does, and so perhaps that's why nothing happens.
Yeah.
They're just focused elsewhere.
I think she had the keeper had the foretelling. Then they tried to get that information from the Amerlins. And like, what does she say? Where's this child at? How can we find him? And so once they got that information, or as much as they could, then they kind of backed off and started searching. And that's when you have, like you guys mentioned, the race against Moiraine, and Moraine's doing her search, and they end up in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was probably one of the storylines of one of those prequel novels we never got.
Right.
So
Right. But I mean, there's other talents too, like dreaming.
yeah, I like
Right.
dreaming.
And so, which is very prominent with the Aiel, right?
Yeah.
The Aiel are very aware of, dreamwalkers and other stuff like that.
Wise ones.
The wise ones, and obviously with the Wolf brothers
Yep.
as well.
Did Elias, was he a dreamwalker,
I think so.
or did he just talk to the wolves?
I don't know.
That's
All
a
right,
good
Mark.
question. I don't know.
I don't.
I mean, I assume that all the Wolf brothers were dreamwalkers,
yeah.
but I don't know if that's
I
actually
don't
true.
remember reading about him in the dream world, or him giving him any advice.
But dreaming from the Aes Sedai perspective at this time was very infantile,
Yeah.
right? Nothing compared to the wise ones, like not even close.
Wise
And
ones
that-
were masters.
Oh, they were very, very good, right? A lot. Same with the Wolf brothers, right? Very good in the world of dreams. But the Aes Sedai, there were some that had minor, dreaming talents, but it was more like the ability for like lucid dreaming, kind of a thing, not to really control the world around them.
Well, Egwene was the first dreamwalker in hundreds of years among
Right.
the Aes Sedai, right? So a lot of the information had been lost.
Right.
I like dreaming.
And so apparently, I mean, in the white books here, it says there's some other ones called like aligning the matrix, spinning earth fire, and milking tears.
Okay.
So I don't know what those are, but milking tears.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so it says that they're only known for their name and sometimes vague descriptions. So
yeah. So Aes Sedai, huge player in this series, and I'm glad we're seeing him on screen, right? We're seeing some good representation in the show. The weaving, great representation in the show. So I think that that part at least they kind of dovetail and work together pretty well to give us a good idea of what's going on. Because reading about weaves is different than seeing it, right? And now when we read it, you can picture those scenes from the show. So I like that.
right.
And I think this season 2 we'll see a lot more Aes Sedai and what goes on in the White Tower. Yeah, anything else on the Aes Sedai or tower you guys want to bring up?
There's the whole concept of warders, but I think we can get into warders. Warders are kind of their own thing, right? A big part of the Green Aja, obviously, right? And definitely, still a part of the blue and others. The only one they don't really associate with is the red. But I think we could kind of have our own. We should do another interesting dive into warders and the warder society and perhaps how that kind of relates to the different sword masters across the world, right?
Is every warder a sword master?
No. I think they use. So, my opinion, I think they use similar forms but call them different things. I do not think they are all sword masters. I think there's several that could be and may not officially be recognized, but I don't think they all are.
Yeah.
Like Gawain. Is Gawain a sword master?
Yes, because he killed what's his name? He killed their trainer.
That's right.
Rebellion.
That's right.
He fought him in 1-on-1 and killed him. So he is. We know that Galad is.
Yeah.
Right, because he takes on Eamon Valda.
Yep.
And kills him.
But both of those happened as a result of an event, right? Not as the warder training.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Because I think you have to defeat. I don't actually know all the ways to become swordmaster, but I know one of the ways is to kill or defeat in battle a swordmaster, and so we know they are. So I only think we only know of like 4 or 5 swordmasters that are with the warders. But I mean, I don't know if the rest are considered swordmasters or not. So I was just wondering.
Yeah, I would say no, just based on how many there are, right, and their different levels of expertise. So, yeah, we can get more into that in another deep dive. But so that's it for the Ajahs for this time. Hopefully that kind of cleared some things up for you, or helped you gain some anchor points moving forward to kind of help explain it all and see the big picture. So I want to thank you guys for joining us here on the Fourth of Aaron podcast, and stay tuned for more chapter reviews and other topic concepts that we will talk about here in the future. So thanks, guys, and we'll catch you next time.
See you guys.
See you later.